and welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about all of the books I read in May, which is a slightly one-sided video because most of the books that I read in May, which were 6, were David Eddings books. So yeah, I don't know how much we have to talk about those because 5 of those are from 2 series, so obviously I can't go into too much detail like topic wise, and one is a standalone prequel, kind of, not really standalone, whatever, a prequel to the first 2 series. So we will have to see yeah, how this is gonna work out. And then I have 2 different books actually. But yeah, let's start with the first book, and that was my absolute favorite this month, and that is Polgara the Sorceress. And this is the second prequel to the Belgariad and the Malorian series. This book is written from the perspective of Polgara, and she tells her life story. If you've read the series, you obviously know Polgara, and you have heard a lot about her. I love her. She's one of my favorite characters in the books, and I really loved getting to know her story and her perspective on things. The book spans, obviously, over 3,000 years. She's, I don't know if they are necessarily immortal, but they live a long time. So yeah, we have like a lot that is tackled in here. It is a hefty book. I think we have like, what, yeah, 800 pages of this story, but this one read fantastically. I really loved it. I loved like all of the little details in the story, the things that we had no explanation for so far in the other books, like getting explained a little bit more, getting a little bit more of her perspective, why she is how she is in the books that we like in the Belgariad when we start originally with the series, and a little bit also of an explanation that is a little bit more detailed about the family of our main character in Belgariad, which was sometimes a little bit irritating because I always thought, next point in the book we're coming to the present, but we never did. The present or only starts like at the really, really end, which makes sense, but I don't know. I was confused with the timelines here. And then in the very, very end, we get a little bit of like a snippet of the present, and I was so sad that we don't have more books in the series. But it is what it is. I gave this 5 stars. It's brilliant. I love this. I think this is one of my favorites from Eddings. I think this together with the first one of the Belgariad, because I kind of find the beginning of this whole journey to be one of the best ones. I love a lot of them, but like, I don't know. It just has a little bit more like emotions behind it, I feel like. So yeah. Then after that, I read the Elenium, and I read the whole series, so all 3. The first one, which is the Diamond Throne, actually got 4 stars, and then these 2 got 3.5 and 3 stars. So yeah, sadly, with this series, I liked it less the more I read from it. It's hard to talk about these without comparing them to the Belgariad and the Malorian series, and I think the biggest thing that was so different in these is the undertone of the story. I feel like the Belgariad and the Malorian were really positive, uplifting stories. They had their sad moments and the more dramatic moments, but all in all it felt like a really positive, good-natured fantasy series, fantasy epic kind of, and that is something that really speaks to me, to be honest. The Elenium is much more of a darker tone and a colder tone, in my opinion, and I didn't vibe with that as much as I did with the Belgariad. We have our main character who is called Sparhawk, I think is, I don't know how you would pronounce it. And he is a Pandian knight, which is like this religious church organization of knights, and they keep the peace. And he's also the queen's champion. The queen is in crystal because her a relative of hers tried to kill her so he could get the throne, and now the empire is in a little bit of like political trouble. And Sparhawk comes back from exile, and he obviously wants to help his queen and save her, and that is the journey we're going on with the series. The series has had utterly too much running around for me. but like it felt so senseless, and I think that is the biggest problem that I have with this series. Um, we were running from one city to another to do something that felt utterly useless and pointless, um, because like he has to find this like um thing in the second book. In the first book, we are only like getting into the situation. We're kind of finding out what is like going on here at all, and is there hope for the queen, And then we go in here and we have to find this magical object, and we're doing all of this running around, talking with people, never getting really much further in the story, and then at the end, like, a god just helps us. So all of the running around felt kind of senseless. And that is also what is continuing with this one. And then the longer we get on in the series, I feel like the darker the violence gets, which I don't think is necessary. I think, like in the beginning, for example, we had actually a fight we just skipped, which I found to be really weird. And then the longer we go on, the more brutal the fighting gets, and but like it's not that like our characters are like more angry or anything. I didn't feel like that. I felt like they had this pretty steady feeling of bitterness through the whole story, kind of. But yeah, the fighting just seems to change throughout the story in like a weird way that didn't particularly spoke to me. Yeah, but I feel like what I loved with the other David Eddings books is the banter and the way that the characters behave with one another and the friendships and all of that. Here there is banter in here and there is friendship in here, but it feels so much colder than the Bagariad. I can't like describe it any other way. It feels a little bit more sterile. It isn't necessarily, but compared to the Bagariad, so I think that might be the biggest problem. Like I finished the Bagariad and the Malorian, I was on the high from that, and then this is just such a different tone that I don't love in my fantasy. I love more like not happy-go-lucky fantasy, but like the Lord of the Rings, I feel like those also have like a much more positive undertone, even through all of the dark things happening. And this series just didn't have that for me. And so I didn't quite vibe with that one. And then in the end, we got our ending, which was kind of problematic for me. That is a different topic. It's an age gap marriage that I find to be really, really, really problematic. So yeah, and then we went on, and I read the first two books in the second trilogy, the continuation of the Edenium, and that is the Tamili, which is Domes of Fire and the Shining Ones, and it just got worse from here. I feel like the banter I feel like vanished a little bit. Here we now have the queen that also plays a part. I don't like her at all. I think she's a pretty unlikable character, and everybody behaves really weirdly about her. I couldn't like get into that at all. And then we have a lot more running around, and then we have a pretty big like annoying plot point where we're going back to something that was promised. Oh, we don't need that anymore, and then we went back to it and we need it again. Surprise, surprise. I was annoyed at that. I have to say it. Those are really, really, really low 3 stars because I get why people like them. I just personally cannot deal with them. I don't vibe with them. They're boring. We have the running around again. We have the senseless violence again. This time around in like a neighboring country that kind of needs help, and our main character is supposed to help there, which he still is still Sporehawk. And then we have like these like ghostly kind of enemies, and yeah, I was disappointed. I have to say it like it is. I have the last one still to do, which I will read hopefully this month. But yeah, I don't know. I would much rather read the first 2 series. I actually wouldn't recommend these, other than if you like colder fantasy that has a lot more darker themes and has a lot of running around that gets you nowhere. But not like the nice kind of running around where you get to see the landscape and all of that. No, this kind of running around is they are always like somebody's always behind them trying to kill them, and they go to like a person that gives like a tiny sliver of a hint, and then in the end a god comes and helps them out because yeah, I wasn't me. It wasn't for me, I have to say. But yeah, if you like it, I'm happy for you. it's not my type of fantasy, sadly. But what I do have to say positively, I like that the endings tried and do something different. Because obviously there could have been the problem that the fantasy would have been too similar to the Begariad, and there's definitely a big difference between them, so that is actually a positive point I have to talk about. Then, I read a new book that I bought myself, which is Parasite by Myra Grant, and I didn't like it at all. I gave it 2 stars. Where do I start? This is kind of a thriller, where it's the main topic is that there's this company that made these parasites that you can buy, and they put them in you, and they give you your medication, they keep you healthy, all of that kind of stuff. And our main character, she has a car accident, and everybody thinks she's brain dead, but then she comes back to life, but she has none of her memories. She can't talk, she can't walk, she had to learn to breathe, to eat, all of that. And so at the point that the story starts, we are 6 years later. She's now working at an animal shelter. She has a boyfriend, again, the one that she had pre-accident left her. Surprise, surprise. And she lives with her family. And she has to go to the company with a parasite to help them study the parasite because they think the parasite helped her. And then everything goes bad from there pretty much because it is a thriller. The main problem is from the beginning you know what the ending is. It is so obvious. It is incredibly obvious, which for me in a thriller just doesn't work. I don't get why you would do that. There was nothing surprising in here. I don't know, a few characters were like, oh, they are dead. That was maybe a little bit surprising, but most of this book was not surprising, which I don't know. It was slow. It was really slow. Also as well, the characters feel pretty bland, I have to say. They just feel so average, so forgettable, I would say. So yeah, I actually didn't like this. I think this is the first book that I really didn't like from Myra Grant, or Sean McGuire, because Myra Grant is her pen name. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I will not continue with the story. What I read review-wise is that the books in itself weren't that good, but if you like, the overall story is supposed to be good, but why would I read 3 books that I don't enjoy to have an overarching story that is cool? I don't quite get the concept, but I did read online that that is how a lot of people felt about it. So if you are in the mood to read 3 books that might not be at all that good, but the story concept is cool, go ahead, try them. Otherwise, I would recommend to read Parasite. I don't get it. And then the last book I read was a reread, and that was the Mistborn series, the book 1, which is The Final Empire. My partner is currently reading this and he's really enjoying it, which I'm happy about. He's finally picked it up, and because he was talking about it constantly, I was really in the mood to read it again. And I have never done a reread of the Mistborn series. I don't know if I will continue with the series right now because I have a lot of other books that I also want to read, a lot of other rereads I want to do. But yeah, this is a 5-star read. I love this fantasy. I love the characters. They're all so interesting. I like the whole concept of the story. And even though I obviously know where it's going, it's still so nice to see the way Win changes and learns, and all of these characters where I know what they will be doing in the future, and just having my partner talk with him about it, seeing his perspective on the characters. He was really unsure about Vin in the beginning, and she has really gone on him, which I'm really happy about. And I love this book. If you want a really good fantasy, go and read the Mistborn series if you haven't already. Obviously, a lot of people have read the Mistborn series, but I think this is still one of my absolute favorites from Sanderson. Just the way the story begins, the way the story is told. I love that we get the story and extra information in these small little tiny segments, and thrown in here and there, so you get a little bit of a gist of what the story is of this world, but you don't get to know too much too soon. So, you know, that there's a lot of mystery still. I love it. I absolutely love it. Vin is a brilliant main character. Calcia is Calcia. He is a complicated main character, but I still like him. And then, yeah, Eland, I do really like Eland. I think he's a cool character. Seist, absolute favorite. Like, there's so many of my favorite characters in here because they are just brilliantly written. So, yeah, a really good end to the month, to be honest. Yeah, it was a really good idea to do a reread of this one. I will keep it with one because, yeah, I love standalones a lot more than series, and I feel like you could read this as a standalone. Obviously, there's a lot more to the series, but it also works as a standalone. So, yeah, brilliant, brilliant book. Was a lot of fun. Would recommend, actually. So yeah, those were the 8 books that I read in May this year. If you've read any of these and have want to tell me your opinion about the book, please leave it down below. I always love to talk about these things, especially with the Eddings books. I know that a lot of people like the second series like a whole lot. I think I'm much more of an outlier when it comes to that, but yeah, I love to hear your opinion on the books. So please leave them down below, and thank you so much for being here and for watching. I hope you have a really nice week, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!